Economic growth, the holy grail of nation states. Year upon year, the bigger the number, the better off the country. The larger the GDP, the more prosperous the people. That's what they say. But one economist questions our conventional notions of what it means for economies to grow. Just as children grow, a good thing, so do tumors and many other really bad things. Between those with faith in the invisible hand and those with faith in an all-encompassing state calling the shots, is there maybe another way for economies to become more fair, more adaptable, so everyone's basic human needs can be met, so humans can live dignified lives without wrecking ourselves and our planet in the process? Kate Raworth says there is. The Guardian calls her the planet's economist. Well, let's speak to the mind behind Doughnut Economics, 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. Kate, welcome to the InnerView. Good to have you on the program. How are you doing?
Oh, it's a pleasure to join you.
Tell me, what's the problem with the global economy in a word or two?
The obsession with endless growth.
And what's the price of that growth?
The price is that in the pursuit of endless economic growth, the world's richest countries have been leading in the destruction of the life-supporting systems of our planet. This is why we face climate and ecological breakdown. And we need to learn that, just like in our children, growth is a wonderful, healthy phase of life. But things that last and survive and thrive, they learn to grow up. And we need to end the addiction to endless growth, especially in the richest nations in the world.
You want responsible growth and sustainable growth.
I want to go beyond growth. I want to see countries that learn to thrive. The goal must become one of meeting the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. And that doesn't mean endlessly growing our GDP. It means literally thriving between social and planetary boundaries. It's a very, very different shape of progress, right? The 20th century was dominated by this shape, up through the ceiling. The 21st century will be dominated by thriving in balance. And this is just like a heartbeat, right? We understand in our own bodies that health lies in balance. Enough food, but not too much. Enough temperature, but not too much. Enough water, oxygen, exercise, but not too much. This is the health of the human body. Can we take what we deeply understand in our own bodies to the planetary body and recognize we must learn to live together, over 8 billion people on this planet, in ways that meet the needs of every person, but do so within the life support systems of our planetary home? This is an utterly different goal for the 21st century, and we should not expect last century's theories or government policies or business models or lifestyle aspirations to get us there. We need to invent again.
And in our video wall, we have a donut of the unhealthy variety. We've got, it looks like a strawberry coating with some sprinkles. Not very healthy. I don't think you can have a healthy donut like that. It's more crispy, creamy, or Dunkin'-esque. Tell me about your donut. Tell me the inspiration behind the donut, and in a nutshell, tell us what the donut means.
So the donut I offer you is the only one that actually turns out to be good for us. It's incredibly healthy because it's a vision for thriving life. But yes, think of a donut, the kind with a hole in the middle, and think of humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of that picture. This means that the hole in the middle of the donut is a place where people are left falling short on the essentials of life. That's where people who don't have the resources for health and education, for housing and security, for income and voice are falling short. We want to leave nobody in the donut's hole. Now, you could say that was a very 20th century goal. Increase our economies, grow GDP, and everyone will have the resources they need to meet their needs. So we have to add to this a very 21st century understanding that as we use Earth's resources, we come up against an ecological limit beyond which we must not go, because that is where we overturn and transform the life support systems. We depend on this living planet. We depend upon a stable climate and fertile soils and healthy oceans and thriving ecosystems. And when economies seek to grow forever, they undermine that delicate web of life. So the donut says, leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's limits. And this is the goal we strive for.
So the hole is that vortex in the middle where people plunge into poverty and deprivation.
Yes.
The edges are the diseases of civilization or excesses harming the planet, using more than you need, and forcing more people in the middle. So the fleshy part is the good part, the healthy part. If you had to describe the current state of the global donut and the current fleshy part, is it a very thin one?
So the current state of the global donut is a double whammy crisis. Billions of people are falling short. Billions of people live in that hole in the middle. We know that billions of people don't have enough food to eat every day or have clean water. Many kids don't go to school. Millions, billions of people have no access to the most fundamental primary health care. And at the same time, collectively, humanity has overshot at least 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries we recognize on climate breakdown, on land conversion, on biodiversity loss, on excessive fertilizer use. So this is our inheritance at the beginning of the 21st century, and it is resulting from the deeply degenerative and divisive economic model that the 20th century led us into. That's the story we have to turn around. So at the moment, we are far outside the donut on both sides. We need to transform the dynamics of this story, right? So we need to go from a degenerative economy to a regenerative one where we regenerate Earth's landscapes, we regenerate our communities, we create circular economies that use resources again and again far more carefully rather than throwing them away. But we must also create distributive economies where the value created is shared far more equitably with everybody who co-creates it. So that's a real challenge to changing the way that global supply chains and global industries currently work.
When you say distributive, it sounds left-wing. Tell me why it's not left-wing.
Because all living systems distribute the resources. Our bodies distribute blood through every vein and finger and toe. A tree distributes sap and sugars through every leaf. A tree depends upon the whole to thrive. A system in which it concentrates resources in one branch or one limb, the whole body will die. So if we look at any living system, it learns to share resources. Trees connect underground. They share sugars and messages and signals to each other through their roots. The most thriving animals are those that live socially together and work as a collective. And we humans, we are the most social of all mammals. We are phenomenal in the ways we can live together. And we know that our health and survival depends on the health and survival of the collective. So we need to return to our roots of distributive social behavior.
And I will note you said we are the most social of most animals and not the most socialist of most animals, for the record. I mean, I don't want to get stuck on this point, but I think it's worth mentioning. You've talked about us inheriting these old economic models, left, right, capitalist, socialist, or capitalist, communist, command economies, which are more socialist or communist, versus the free market, Adam Smith, Milton Friedman, the invisible hand, all of that stuff. I've noticed in my career, anytime there's an economic discussion, most people, whichever school they belong to, they're less interested in solutions and fixing the problem and more interested in just winning the argument, more interested in just saying, well, you see, socialist economies become Venezuela, they become Zimbabwe. On the other hand, left-wing economists say, well, you see, look at capitalism. All these people are in poverty. You have all these homeless people on the street. You have all this inequality. So is that something you sought to change as you trained as an economist, that you wanted to rise above and do something different?
So one thing I notice when I get into economic conversations with people is that when we go to these isms of the 20th century, right, capitalism, communism, socialism, people very quickly draw on the examples you just mentioned on both sides of the debate. And if that's the way we go, we just get stuck in debating the past. The past is so different from today's realities. And I think there are far, far more possible futures than the 20th century isms that we've can leave behind. I think that's intellectual baggage from the past. What I find much, much more constructive, where people from very different starting points will actually engage and listen, is when we talk about a clear shared goal, and that's why I bring the donut. Do we agree that we should meet the needs of all people in the world and do so within the means of this delicately balanced living planet? If we do, now let's start talking about what kind of policies and institutions could get us there. What would it mean to create a regenerative future? What would it mean to create a distributive future? Now, of course, people from different political backgrounds or persuasions will bring different kinds of policies, but let's talk in terms of how we believe those policies will or will not bring about regenerative and distributive futures. I've found that by using this clearer language that doesn't bring the old political baggage, people go further in actually debating and listening rather than hurling old political rocks at each other.
Tell me about the successful projects that have tried to implement the donut, whether at a very local micro level or bigger than that even.
So my book, Doughnut Economics, was published in 2017. And what really thrilled me was as soon as it came out, people came to me saying, not only I like the ideas in this book, but I actually want to do this, or I am doing this. I'm a teacher in the classroom, in classrooms around the world. I'm pushing aside the curriculum because I believe the students should learn this concept. I'm a community organizer. I'm an entrepreneur. I want my company to help bring humanity into the donut. I'm a town councillor or a mayor. I want my city, my town, my district to live in this space. Can we do that? And today there are over 70 local governments around the world, whether city administrations, towns, districts, states, that are working with the donut as a framework for transforming their future. So these are 70 places that have said, our goal isn't to grow, grow, grow endlessly. We want people here to thrive, and we want to live within the means of the planet. This began with Amsterdam, but then quickly Copenhagen, Barcelona, Brussels. It's now spread to Vermont in the US, to Ipoh in Malaysia, Salhana Bay in South Africa, El Monte in Chile, cities in Turkey. All over the world, there are towns and cities picking this up, saying, what would it mean for us here? And what's really powerful about it is that they're adapting it to their own local context to make it real where they are. So it's not imposing a solution, and there's no imposed policies. It's all about what would it mean to thrive here, to be regenerative, to be distributive here with our history, our culture, our values, and our possibilities.
Why is GDP as a metric not enough? And what do you have to replace it with in order to maybe find the proof of the donut working or the donut system working in a measurable way that everybody can agree upon?
So GDP simply measures the monetary value of goods and services sold in a country in a year. Now, if you want to know that, then it's a really useful metric, but you have to ask, what are we buying and selling? Are we selling and paying for health and education? Are we paying for cleaning up oil spills and divorce? We really need to know the contents of a nation's output, because that transforms the results in a place. So GDP was a useful 20th century measure. It was in fact invented for wartime economies, but we now know far, far too much. And even the inventor of GDP himself, Simon Kuznets, I think if he were alive today, he'd say, what are you doing? I warned you about the limits of this metric back in the 1950s. I cannot believe half a century later, you're still using it. You've got so much richer data. You can measure people's well-being almost at source. You can ask people in the street, on their mobile phone, what is your health, your education, your well-being? How is your income, your security? You've got an array of national domestic data that tells you the reality of people's lives. You can measure the carbon concentration in the atmosphere, the acidification of the oceans, the health of your ecosystems. Use the real natural metrics of life, of people and her planet. Don't use money as the metric, because it's not going to tell you about life itself. Let's now measure life in real terms. And we can absolutely create national donuts, which have been created all over the world. Could I tell you that the country that's closer than any other to meeting the needs of its people within the means of the living planet is not one of the countries that typically considers itself developed or advanced? It's Costa Rica. They're far closer than the world's richest nations, which should never call themselves developed, because there's nothing developed about overshooting planetary boundaries and undermining the life support systems of our planet. I think, in fact, every nation is in some way a developing nation now, because we are all on paths of transformation.
That's interesting. So if there was a G7 or G20 of donut nations, Costa Rica would be top of the pile.
Well, of course, instead of a G20, we think we should have a D20.
All right.
Invite the countries that are closest
D20.
to living in the donut to create the D20, and to lead other countries in what kind of policies have enabled them to do this. How can we all aspire to that leadership?
I wonder, the largest economy in the world and still the superpower, it's arguable. I mean, some people would say the Chinese are going to take over and the like, but the US still seemingly the creme de la creme based on many conventional metrics. Where would the US be in the D20? Would it even be in the D20?
I'm sorry to say that the US would not be in the D20, because when we look at the US, they have a very high national income, over $60,000 per person per year. They have very high levels of inequality that really leave many people falling short in the whole. But they have massive ecological overshoot of carbon emissions, water use, material use, land, global footprint of drawing on Earth's resources to meat consumption in the US. So they have a very, very long way to travel, just like Canada and Australia are like that in their overshoot. They've got a long way to travel back towards the donut and to getting a seat at that table.
Is there any room or space in the donut for billionaires, Kate?
I don't think there's room or space in the donut for billionaires, and I'll tell you why. We currently have a world in which the richest 1% of people own over half of the world's wealth. This is the divisive world we have, and that's why it needs to be far, far more distributive. There's no way we can meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet with such extremes of inequality. And over the last decade, the number of billionaires in the world has doubled, from around 1,000 billionaires to over 2,000 billionaires. So this inequality is going in the wrong direction. This is why we need more distributive societies within countries, but also far, far more distributive between nations. And this is a rebalancing we need to see between the global north and the so-called global south. So massive transformation within countries, and of course between, if every nation is to start to move towards living in the donut.
$999,999,000. That's going to be the limit. I wonder, this sounds attractive to people in a corporation, in a CSR meeting, corporate social responsibility meeting. Hey, there's this cool thing we can embrace called the donut, and we can look like we're achieving change, and it can score us some brownie points on social media. However, we don't really have to do too much about it. Have you encountered many of those types as the concept has grown since your book came out?
Oh, definitely, because there are plenty of companies, ranging from fossil fuel companies to multinational banks, that would love to have a little bite of the donut and put it on their website and use it for greenwashing. So whenever we engage with any companies, we always focus on the same issues. We say, we don't want to talk about the design of your products. We want to talk about the design of your company itself. And there are 5 design traits. I have them right here.
Yeah,
okay?
I was wondering what you were grabbing from behind you there. Okay,
we need to talk about your purpose, right?
Yeah.
Your purpose. Why does your company even exist? What is it in service of in the world? Your networks of relationship with your customers, your suppliers, your employees, your industry allies. Are you living out your values in those, or are you extractive? How is your company governed? Who's in the room? Who has voice? Have you given nature a voice in your board? Do future generations and workers have a voice in your board? How is your company owned? Is it owned by a founding family for 300 years, by an entrepreneur, by venture capital, by shareholders, by its employees? Because how your company is owned, and now we're going down and down to the deepest stuff, shapes how it's financed, where that finance is coming from, and whether it's extracting or whether it's reinvesting in your purpose. So these 5 design traits really take us on a deep journey into the deep design of a company, and they are very, very strong predictors of what that company can be and do in the world. If it's driven and governed and owned in the interests of finance rather than serving its purpose, I think that company has got almost no chance of ever getting into the donut. So we need to see a transformation. And again, this takes us back to the 20th century, right? The 20th century celebrated CEOs of shareholder-owned companies that drove great dividends for their shareholders. We want to see 21st century companies that actually use business as a vehicle for transformation. Business can help bring us back inside planetary boundaries. It can help to meet the needs of all people, but only if it's actually deeply designed to do that.
Well, yeah, after you showed them that, they're probably like, okay, it's too much hard work. Forget this donut thing. Let's just change our profile picture to Ukraine or Black Lives Matter or something. It's too much hard work. What's been the biggest challenge for you, Kate, as you've engaged with cities, towns, countries, people with their hands at the levers of power and economies? Tell me what's been the hardest thing for you over the past few years.
I have to say, so we choose to engage with places that are ready and wanting to do it. We're never pushing. We're never knocking on shut doors. And it means you get to work with those who are ready, those who are motivated, those who get it. So that's been a privilege of working with the pioneers. But of course, what's hard is that every city is embedded in a nation, which is embedded in a region, which is embedded in the global capitalist system. So they are up against the system as it has been designed, as it has been inherited. They are facing financial pressures, national regulations that stop the transformation that they're trying to bring about at the scale. Every nation would face the same challenges. So how does change actually happen? Where does it begin? And we think it begins at all levels. That's why we work with the United Nations, but also with tiny island states and communities. It begins everywhere all at once. However, we know that change is not happening anything like fast enough. Fossil fuel emissions are still going in the wrong direction. Global exploitation of people and of Earth's resources is still going in the wrong direction. And we know this decade is a critical one for turning around. So we confidently believe that Doughnut Economics provides a very positive, propositional direction that communities aspire to and governments are getting behind. Everything needs to be happening at a far, far greater speed for us to enable thriving in the 21st century.
And Kate, you are still teaching at Oxford, am I right?
Oh, yeah, very much so,
Right.
because I'm really committed to working with the young graduates who will be tomorrow's changemakers and shapers.
And give me a sense of those young graduates, those future leaders and change makers. Tell me a little bit about them.
So the climate strikers, the Fridays for Future's young people who 5-6 years ago were kids marching in the street, they are now at university. They expect to get an education that recognizes straight away the threat to the planet, the need to rewrite economics so that it actually protects planet and people first, rather than protecting financial interests first. They are so smart in their interdisciplinary thinking, and they are all asking me all the time, how can I be an effective change maker? They are graduating from universities looking for companies that deserve their vision, their skill, and their passion. They're looking for governments that will deploy their skills. And they're too often meeting companies that aren't ready for their ambition, governments that are still dragging their heels. So the next generation is ahead of many of our institutions, and they better wake up and catch up if they're going to deserve today's graduates.
Kate Raworth, love your optimism, love your passion, and your theories and your ideas have definitely given me and others a lot to think about and to chew on. I thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the InnerView.
Thank you very much. A real pleasure to chat with you.
Take care.